that.
Is it a triangle? Should I teach you how to do a triangle choke?
Volunteers?
All right, I'll do it.
If you force me.
We met earlier, I'm Serge. My background, I was a military kid, so moved all around the world. My degree is actually in microbiology and molecular genetics, but before that I was going to go into aeronautical and aerospace engineering. But I'm not doing anything related to that. I'm actually in technology and software engineering. So, and I'm actually taking a hiatus from that right now. So today I wanted to...
Taking a what?
I'm taking a break from it right now.
Oh.
Yeah. So I wanted to share with you guys today an experience I had in building an education program in Southern California, and how that led to inspiration on articulating purpose, and then all of the exciting opportunities that have started to open up because of that. So, some visual aids.
I'll need your expertise.
So this was about 8-9 years ago. I reconnected with my old college roommate, my first year college roommate. And we had lost touch for many years, and through the power of the interwebs, we reconnected. And he was telling me about an education program he was thinking of. And the program was pertaining to quotations. And his vision was to create something like a spelling bee format, but with quotes. And he was doing this because he wanted to supplement the traditional curricula that was out there. So very Eurocentric, very structured, very mandated. So at least 30% of our quotes are from alternative sources. So Native American, other fictions that wouldn't be given as class assignments and things like that, so to broaden the kids' horizons. And the way that the quote bee works is there's two formats. There's the we create the kids come up with a quote for themselves, or they have to recall a quote that they're given. And it ranges from 5th grade all the way up to high school. And when we were designing the program, we were designing it as a comprehensive. It was just that the quote was the first step in it. So when kids enter our program, it includes a social media program, a social media component. It includes an after-school program. It includes college exposure. It includes support structures for their parents. So when students start with our program, they're given a portfolio across multiple disciplines. So a student might have a section in there for civic duty, for music, for academics, for athletics and things like that. And our point is we want to challenge students in ways that they might not before. So if in the music component, if you played flute, we might ask the child, have you thought about making second chair? Okay, now that you made second chair, how about first chair? Now that you made first chair, have you thought about composing? Now I don't know about you, but when I was growing up, I was never challenged by any teacher to compose music. And most of the kids that are in this program are in underserved communities, underfunded communities. And since we launched the program, it's more than doubled every year. And we have chapters in Brazil, actually, of all places.
Nice.
And what was really heartwarming about this program is that parents would come into the office and they would come in crying. Now, mind you, most of these parents, English is not their first language. So they're growing up in multilingual families where English is not their first language. And they would come in crying saying, my child was at my dinner table last night, 5th grader, debating Winston Churchill and Socrates.
Wow.
Right? Now these are a lot, in San Bernardino County, a lot of Spanish speaking. So that was the program that we had, and it evolved into the next component we went after, which was the SKIP program, which was the Salinas and Coyotes was the name of the school, instruction in prose and poetry. So the kids were writing poetry. And again, when I was in the 5th grade, I was never challenged to write poems before, and I wouldn't have had the confidence then to write a poem back then. So here you have the kids that are hosting a fair where they're sharing some of their poetry, kids lining up, getting ready to present. The parents in the college, the UC Santa Barbara is very close partnership with this program. So it evolved into the SKIP program, which was with poetry. Then something started to happen where administration had changed, and as any of you from a teaching background, or so many ways, well, then you know that bureaucracy gets into play, and even though it's doing good for the kids, even though their test scores are going up, even though it's engaging the parents, because it doesn't fit their curriculum, because it doesn't fit the traditional pedagogy, they'll cut it, and they'll actively try and sabotage it. So we started seeing declines in support from the leadership, or from the administration and the schools, and we actually didn't need anything from them but meeting space. It doesn't seem like a lot, but that's the main thing, because where else were we going to meet these students and their parents? And it came down to they weren't supporting us because they were citing liability. Because if you have people on campus, then it's a liability concern, which was BS anyway, but that's what happened. So this started to die down in 2016. And so my buddy right there, Will, amazing educator, we did a retreat where we went into San Bernardino Mountains. We rented a cabin, and we did that as a workshop on what were we going to do next. How were we going to combat these challenges of the administration, so the concerns of the administration to continue this program. And so we took 4 days. I believe we were there for 4 days, and we were very intentional about coming up with our agenda, coming up with these rituals that we would do. And so in the San Bernardino Mountains, we came up with this idea of, this goes along with what you had said last, and this is how it connects. There's only so much he and I could do. So how could we do things in a way that would scale? How could we do things in a way that would empower other people to pursue their passions? How could we unlock the potential of all these educators across the country? And out of this, one of the programs we came up with was we created a teaching and an innovation in teaching award. And again, if you talk to any of your family members who are educators, you know how important awards are, because it actually protects the teachers. It protects them from action from administration. It's really hard to dismiss a teacher who has awards. So we were doing this intentionally to help provide field cover for the educators who were doing these and other programs. So that's something that's starting to roll out nationally now, this innovation in education, innovation in teaching award. But if you look at some of the things that we were coming up with, right, we were talking about, we always wanted to start with culture, right? For those of you that are from the Valley and all of that, we know that culture eats strategy for lunch, right? So strategy is what you do to execute the thing that you want to do, but culture is the thing that sustains you and helps you accomplish that thing. And so I'm not going to read through it, but you'll see the kind of mindset that we had about this was that there are things like the assumption of truth carries with the responsibility to an obligation to question. Right? We're talking about ritual creates culture. So we spent some time doing that, and then some themes arose, and we wanted to be holistic, so we were mind, body, and spirit. This goes to sleep way too quickly. So I have to keep it away. So from that, you'll see in the lower right, we started talking about, well, how do we as two individuals empower this action across the country? And so we came up with this idea that our mission is to incite the makers of movements. And each one of these words were deliberately chosen. We don't want to inspire, because people always say inspire. We want to be challenging. We want to be disruptive. We want to be a little bit of renegade. We want to incite you. To inspire you gets you so far. But if I incite you to do something, that's emotional. That's a fire, right? So many people respond to inspiration in different ways, but we intentionally want to incite you into action. And we didn't want to incite movements. What we wanted to do is we wanted to help the makers of those movements. Because even though we've been focusing on education, my buddy Will and I, we have so many interests in so many different disciplines, but we can't possibly have enough lifetimes to become experts in very many of them. But what we could do, and what we did very well, was empower those people who could do those things. And so as a consequence of that, things like the Teaching and Education, Innovation in Education Teaching Award came about. And it was around this time that I was approached by the world record holder in memory, Dave Farrow, because I'd invited him to give a talk at my company. I was having some challenges about remembering names. So
This is a memory competition?
it's a memory competition.
Huh.
So
Shay.
I invited him to come by and give a talk, and getting to know him, he was reading my blog and he says, "Hey Serge, I see this education program you were doing down in San Bernardino. I want to take my memory system into schools and into lifelong learners." And Dave is the world record holder in memory because he memorized 59 decks of cards in sequence. It's over 3,000 something cards. But what was remarkable about his feat and why he hasn't been beaten since is because Dave could, a year later they did a test on him, and it wasn't just that he could recite them in sequence. You could say, "Give me deck 14, card number 8," and he could tell you that. And there's actually, it's a little bit, there should be actually a documentary on the memory because there's a lot of backstabbing, there's a lot of intrigue, there's a lot of drama actually. And so there are a lot of haters.
Wow.
And like the reigning world record holder before Dave has been, like, people have been trying to challenge him for years and no one can break that record. And actually the prior record was himself, he beat his own record.
Oh.
And which one is Dave in the picture?
Yeah.
So Dave is the gentleman in the upper right in the suit, and here in the suit. So he approached me about, "Well, Serge, how do I take this memory system and scale it? How do I inspire all of these lifelong learners?" And so he came up with this format, and if you've ever watched a memory competition, it's pretty boring. Like they'll give it's pretty boring.
I really want to go
For
to
good
that.
reason. For good reason. And so the way it works is like you'll be given a deck of cards and you'll memorize it, and then it's for like 5 minutes you're sitting there watching them stare at cards. Like it's not exciting at all. Or they'll have a string of numbers that they'll have to memorize, and then they'll just recite it out like that. So Dave realized like that's not fun, that's not going to spread, that's not going to catch fire. And so he came up with this format where the people that do memory tournaments, it's a pretty elite and elitist group. So it's like a handful of people that do it around the world, and they just go to tournament after tournament, stroking each other's egos. And so when he asked me to come aboard, I said, "Look, I only want to do this because I want to help democratize practical memory. I want every student who has a hang-up about memory, thinking that, oh, I'm not good at memory, to feel empowered that I can improve my memory in ways that are practical for me. So if I'm studying for a biology test, it's going to empower me for that. If I'm serving my top 10% of my clients, I can remember their names." So the beauty of his program is we've adapted it actually in many different cases. I go out and consult. So I was consulting with the Ferragamo store, and I was teaching their sales reps on how to memorize their top 10% of their clients, which was like over 80% of their income was from these top 10%. And so imagine the kind of impact you can have where your top client comes into your store and you can say, "Oh, how was that trip to the Poconos with your wife, Susan?" Like, wow, I can't believe you remember that. And how did Susie do on the soccer tournament? So they could just recall this on spot. And they could say, "Yeah, your color palette is this, and this was your last purchase, and this is your spending tier, and this is the inventory that you'll want to look at." So it can go from however you need to apply practical memory in your life, because tournaments aren't practical. Memorizing a deck of cards isn't practical. Memorizing long strings of numbers isn't practical, right? Memorizing the yields of certain pine varietals is practical for you.
Never thought this would be practical.
Memorizing, the returns on the investments that you're involved with, right? Not having to look at that list and just know it,
I
right?
knew you were going to say that.
Right. So whatever it may be,
Yes.
you knowing that your competitor, after doing this combination, always goes to the left, 82% of the time, right? And being able to do that on the spot when you have to, plan your next move.
Look
So-
at me, Serge.
So for you, God, you're so scattered. You're like me. It's passing your certification testing for nonprofits. Actually, Dave so the other thing that's remarkable about Dave is he has ADHD and dyslexia. Severe, actually.
Wow.
So the reason why he came up with these techniques was because he had a practical need of, he grew up with teachers telling him, "You're never going to amount to anything. You're dumb." Because back in those days, you didn't have a learning disability. You were just dumb, right? So he knew that he couldn't learn by the traditional methods, so he had to come up with ways for himself to learn. And so when he asked me to come aboard, we thought about how do we tweak the system, one so it's more fun and engaging to compete, and that anyone could approach it. So right before we do a tournament, we actually teach all of the attendees the basic memory techniques in the first hour. And then they can jump right into competition. And we tier it because obviously there are memory masters. I don't think I have a photo of like one of the top champions in the world who was actually at that tournament. You're obviously not gonna compete against him. But the funny thing is with his format, you actually could and sometimes beat him. Mm-hmm. So the way I could beat Dave sometimes. So the way it works is there's different events. It may be deck of cards, maybe words, it may be numbers, it could be anything, it could be images. And so he teaches you the basic technique, which is to chain and peg these items to a visual story. Yeah. And so right here you see the competitors are looking at the same list of things, whatever that list of things may be, and you give them a set amount of time, and then when the time's up, you take it away, and then they have to play like a volley back and forth, recalling. And so there's actually a lot of strategy involved, because you might think, well, I'm just gonna go through the top 10 and hope my competitor doesn't make it to 11, or you can have a lapse in concentration and actually forget what the third thing was, but it doesn't matter because that person has the third thing. And the beauty of the format is, as you get better, it can be more challenging. So maybe we start you off with 3 minutes, then we move it to 2 minutes, then we move it to 1 minute. Maybe you start off memorizing single digit numbers, and then we move to double digit or triple digit. Maybe you blast a stereo while you're memorizing. So the format lends itself to adapt however your growth path is. And we do it kind of like how Guinness does it. So they don't actually send a Guinness judge out to every record attempt. Actually, everyone in this room has the potential to have their own Guinness World Record. It's actually not that hard. You just have to come up with an event you want to set, and then you send a video to the Guinness organization, and they watch the video and they're like, yeah. Now, for ones that are highly contested, they will send a judge out to witness it. But for the most part, if you wanted to say, yeah, I want to do 500 kicks in 5 minutes, like you could set that record. In fact, you ever watched the show Rob Dyrdek's Fantasy Factory? Yeah. He set like, I don't know, 20 records in one day or something like that. So that was the format with the memory that we did. And you can see the audience is, you have some folks in various professions here in the lower right. You have a family, so that woman's actually a friend of mine. Her daughter and her father, who's in his 70s, are all playing together. Mm-hmm. And so the format lends itself to your lifestyle. So you can practice for 5 minutes a day, you can practice for an hour a day. You can do it around the dinner table, you can do it, because we're doing here in particular words. If your family said we all want to learn French together, then that's just French vocabulary words. If you're trying to learn the bones of the body, then those would just be bones in the body that you would be memorizing, right? So that led into that. And then through my work, I used to run innovation programs for eBay. I say used to because I'm no longer with the company, and it'll lead into what I'm doing next. But because of that, I had an opportunity to consult with Phuket, the city of Phuket in Thailand, and the city of San Jose on their smart city initiatives. And what was really refreshing to me about these two particular cities that were doing it is, when we talk about smart cities, most people think about, well, what's the technology? Well, they came to you because you're a technologist, they came to you because of innovation. But you'll see in actually both of the programs, technology is just one small bit. And so what does it mean to be a truly intelligent city? How do you manage the services? How do you inspire the community? How do you empower them? And so I'm actually going through the cycle right now to reconnect with those cities and see how I can help them. The city of Phuket's mission is by 2020. City of San Jose, I think, is 2027. So this goes back and ties back to what I was talking about earlier, which is how do I incite the makers of movements? So I don't want a traditional consulting or advisory board gig with these companies about, okay, here's the technology package you need to put in. No, I want to do things that inspire the citizens to take action. And so that moved into, in the city of San Jose, we have innovation games where leaders from 19 community groups across San Jose come together, and they actually decide where a portion of the city's budget goes. Because what was happening was that, and I didn't actually come up with this format, a good buddy of mine, Luke Holman, came up with this format, and you're actually buying your product. So every table has a set budget, dollar amount, and then they have to choose where they want to spend it. And what was really enlightening about this particular process was city officials make certain assumptions. They'll say, well, these things are important to our citizens because these are the ones that they make the most noise about. These are the ones that we're going to catch hell for if we don't address. But when you actually brought in the citizens into the process, they're like, yeah, actually that doesn't matter to us. We want more of this. What was surprising is like, yeah, we want more funding for the libraries. And libraries in today's day and age, like, who cares about that, right? And so it was also helpful for the citizens because they saw where the money was going to be spent and they were part of that process. And it's always more empowering when you're part of the process because you feel like you had a say in that thing. And so that model of budget games actually was featured in Business Week. A couple other cities that are modeling after this. And obviously it's not the whole city budget, but there's a certain portion of the city budget that gets allocated this way. And then that's evolving into, I should have changed the setting earlier. My thinking of like, so how can I continue to help more? How do I incite these makers of movements? How do I create systems that are self-sustaining, that are scalable? How do you take living room talks from one person hosting up to 25 to 20 people hosting groups of 25? How do you create calls to action that connect this community? How do you help sustain that activity with minimal effort on your part so you can go tend to your Timberland farm? Right?
Which is also minimal.
So I started looking at programs that cities do. This is one of them. There are these great programs around the country where they do coffee with a cop. So this is where the community is trying to connect the citizens with law enforcement in a positive setting of dialogue. And yet, these are all in different cities. There's no connection across any of these. Every single one of these cities, every single one of these precincts has to do it, start from scratch every time. And you would think, well, why don't they just talk to each other? Yeah, they don't. And this is just one program, right? Imagine there's a great city pass. Everyone travel to Chicago? If you ever go to Chicago, definitely pay for the city pass. It is so, have you used the city pass? It's so worth it. You get access to public transportation, you get access to a lot of the museums, a lot of the city services, and so a lot of city attractions, all in this one convenient price. Now imagine what it took for that city to come up with that price, right? They had to calculate how many people are going to go to this attraction unaided, how much would they have spent there, and so where do we move the slider on the cost of the city pass program so that we're not losing money, but it's the sweet spot of yield to return on if we price it at this amount, this many more people will take advantage of it, and then you'll have the secondary economic effects of spending and things like that, right? Well, every city has to figure that out. Every city has to calculate, right? City of Chicago, we have these attractions, we have this population density, we have this amount of tourism. They have to calculate that every time. And that costs city resources. You've got to do those studies. San Jose has a city pass program. They had to do that too. Well, now the technologist in me gets up and gets pissed off. Like, that's a simple algorithm. That's a machine learning algorithm. It just says, give me all your inputs, I'll give you the optimal pricing that you should put. Why is there not an algorithm out there that I just check into GitHub? GitHub is a repository for code that can be shared. Why don't I just put that there? And now any city who wants to do this can use that as a starting point. The people who do coffee with the cop programs, why can't they check in their templates? Why can't they check in their template of how do you write the precinct and ask if they'd be interested in this? How do you approach and cold call the cafes that are going to sponsor this location? How do you do the mail marketing? How do you do social media marketing? Every time, every single one of these had to figure that out. So what if there was a space and a place where people could share this information in an efficient manner? What if, for example, there was a grant writing program? So everyone in this room has something they're passionate about. If you needed some help from the city, what would you do? You would go to your city council and ask for money. Every city has a finite amount of resources. So the city has to say no many, many times. But imagine that I could empower half of you to find your own funding. That's at least half of you that the city doesn't have to say no to. And that's at least half of you that can be empowered to go do something immediately without the city being a roadblock. And it's strange a lot of times when I give talks and when I consult these cities, because they always imagine that my answer is going to be technology. It's not. The innovator mindset might happen to use technology as a tool, but it's the mindset of what you said before. You read cross-disciplinary things. You ask the things of who did it that wasn't supposed to be able to do it. For those of you that are too young to remember, there was this basketball player named Spud Webb. Short dude, not much taller than me, and that dude had hops. He could dunk for days. By conventional wisdom, he should not be able to do that. So if I were 6'3" and I wanted to learn how to dunk like a champ, I'm not looking at other tall dudes. I'm looking at that little dude. I'm like, how did you do that? Because you're not supposed to be able to do that, right? If you were gonna increase the yield for your farm, you might say, who has a smaller property than I do, but yields way more? You're not gonna go to your contemporaries who have the same thing, right? You're not gonna go to another Reiki master who's done it and said, oh yeah, I did it in 10 years. No, I wanna talk to the person who did it in 2, right? So this idea of how do we create these systems that are self-sustaining and how do we catalyze that action? And so what would happen if I came up with the format of inviting college professors to donate of their time and say, we're gonna teach a monthly grant writing workshop and anyone in the city can attend. And in this grant writing workshop, we're gonna teach you all the tools that are out there so you can find the grants. Every single thing you guys have described tonight, I guarantee there's a grant for it. There are billions of dollars in grants in the United States alone, right? But how would you know where to look? And even if you say, okay, I'm gonna look on this tool to search for grants, how would you write a successful application that has a shot to be approved, right? So what would happen if I invited college professors who do this all day, every day to fund their labs and their programs to teach you? Now here's where it has to be finessed. So what if I couldn't find a professor who was willing to donate her time? Then I might have to go to the city and say, I need $1,500 to do this for 2 months. And then after the 2 months, I'm gonna figure out a way to self-sustain. So here's what I do in that scenario. I say, okay, you went to my workshop and I'm gonna keep your contact information, and then a month later, I'm gonna reach out to you and say, how did that go? And you said, Serge, it got granted. I have my money. Great. For give back, would you consider coming back and you teaching the talk in 3 months? Give back. Empower someone else to do what you just did. In a class of 20, all I need is like 2 of those people. And it rolls forward, right? So now what was originally the city's funding for $1,500 becomes a self-sustaining program. And all of these things I talk about, you do in this open source system that I'm tinkering around with. For those of you in tech, this will be familiar to you. There's this tool we use called GitHub. It was recently purchased by Microsoft, actually. And traditionally it's used for code. But there's not, the software doesn't care whether it's code or documents or images or templates or contracts. It's just a place to store this information. What would happen if I created a community action network where I create hundreds of repositories for a coffee with a cop and a grant writing program and a city pass? And in some of these I have code, but in most of these I just have documents and templates and email forms and things like that. And so the Community Action Network acronym is CAN, because I want San Jose to be able to say San Jose can, and the city of Las Vegas can, and the city of Henderson can. And everything is crowdsourced. This isn't driven by, I'm just starting it, but I don't want to be the single source of management of this. The beauty of the software is I can designate all of you to be admins on this. And so now that's how you scale this, so that it's not just me approving all of these, right? You create dozens to hundreds of thousands. This is how open source works. Open source on paper should not work. Wait, I'm gonna write code for free, and you can take it for free, and you can make money for it, and you don't owe me anything. That shouldn't work. Traditional approaches for software development, that shouldn't work. But there's something inherent in humans that want to share. There's in the book for Drive for software engineers, right? You talk about mastery, autonomy, and community, right? Engineers want to say, my kung fu is the strongest. So just to brag on my shit, I'm gonna post the dopest code out there and I challenge you guys to beat it. Take it if you want to, you're not gonna write better than me, right? That's the mastery component. The autonomy is, no one tells me what to write. The most powerful software in the world now is written by open source. But these engineers decide, this part's broken, I'm gonna fix that part. Or here's a new piece of functionality I care about, I'm gonna write that. And then obviously the community part. So it's applying the things that I've learned with my startups, it's applying the things that I learned through technology, but now applying it to the things that I'm very passionate about, which is empowering others, right, to incite the makers of movements. So full disclosure, eBay just did a big round of layoffs. I was one of those laid off. It sent ripples of shockwaves to the company because they're like, how can you fire Serge? But it is what it is. But that was the universe telling me it's time to move on.
Yes.
Because had I not been laid off, I probably would have stayed there for another 5 years.
Yep.
And I was there for 15. And it wasn't for performance. Every major technology that eBay released over the past 3 years came through my program. I personally wrote 2% of all of eBay's patents. We generated hundreds of millions of dollars for the company. So you couldn't say, well, you guys weren't doing what you're supposed to be doing. These things happen in companies. They have to let go folks, and sometimes it's surgical, most times it's not. And so I was cut. So the universe knew better than me that I needed that nudge to go off and do this thing, because there's no way I would have time to do this if I was doing that. But it created the access for me to do this, because now I can call the city of Phuket and say, how are you guys doing? How can I help? In fact, over the course of my role there, I think 6 or 7 state governments from around the world had come to talk to me about how do you take innovation from software and apply it to innovation in healthcare, innovation in public transportation. And so now my life passion is I'm able to dedicate more of that now to inciting the makers of movements, which is why this particular talk series resonated with me, because that's what you're doing. Every person that comes to your talk is going to walk away with whatever resonates with them. And you may never be able to scale to talk to personally lay hands on 1,000 people. But the 100 people that you do will go off and do other things, and they will send ripples. And that's your energy and that's your power. Because you may individually not cure cancer, but you could lay hands on the researcher who does, right? You can lay hands on the speaker that goes out with the charisma to speak to thousands, to inspire their passion and their potential. So, talk. Questions, concerns?
Yeah, I'd love to talk, and thank you. Actually, like, I would love to scale living room talks, and I think you're the perfect person to ask, actually, because I would like to scale living room talks and have, like, my vision for living room talks basically is to have people in every city doing this, right? Because, like, I think it would just be amazing if I could just travel to any city in the United States or like abroad, and people are just, you know, maybe there's like a main website or something where I can kind of look up some of the living room talks that are happening. And yeah, just have this like underground movement of it. But because it's sort of like done in this like decentralized way, I'm not really sure how to, you know, kind of scale it.
Yeah, if we go back to what we'd come up with in that cabin in the woods, Unabomber style. If you look here, the structures we were setting up this was our educational Inc., right? This was us in the group, that small group of people we work with. We would create these satellites, and these satellites would have mentors who would have the makers and then the movement. And so you don't have to touch the movement. You don't have to look hard. It just so happened that you already knew Chrissy, but you attract your tribe no matter what you do. When you speak your truth and when you're working on something that you're deeply passionate about, you don't have to look, they'll find you. Just keep doing what you're doing, right? And they will come. And your job then is to help them along, to help them get the confidence to say, oh, I can do that. I can set up something like that. Maybe I don't care for the video part. Maybe I don't have that equipment. Maybe I don't have that confidence. It's fine. Because what you're doing right now is you're creating communities, which is so fulfilling and so powerful. Like you said, you know, I was excited because Chrissy and I talked about me coming and hanging out for a little bit because I know nothing of this industry. I know nothing of this city. To see what's your take, what are the challenges you guys are facing, what new ingredients can you add to my learning? How would you solve a problem in a club in a way that I would never think of as a software engineer, right? So we could talk more in depth on very practical step-by-step things, but part of it is already just starting with what you have. And how diligent have you been, for example, tracking everyone's contact information? And then what do you do after that? So I brought this up earlier. Part of what we learned in creating Makers of Movements is, what is that call to action after? Because what happens is you have things like this, and it's not just this, there's lots of kumbaya moments of going to conferences and expos and things like that. And then people feel good and go home, they feel powered up, and then life intervenes, right? So the real makers of movements, those are the people that find that call to action, call that, and it's not often a lot, it's just a little thing. Did any of you sign up with the Women's March movement? They were freaking brilliant at it, and this is why I'm so fierce about supporting women entrepreneurs, because they had their shit together. They had a publication schedule of like, you're gonna get this email every Tuesday, and it's gonna tell you 3 things you need to do right now. That was easy for me. As busy as I was, like, all right, I need to do these 3 things, right? But they were on top of their shit. They had their contact lists, and they used them. Jamie Foxx, before he blew up, when he just first got his gig in Living Color, he used to host these house parties. And this was kind of when he was a no-name. And for those of you now, you may know that Jamie Foxx is a musician. He's very talented. Actually, I think he was accepted at Juilliard. He's a prodigy. And so he would throw these house parties, and he had no budget. And I remember once he was telling the story where he ran into Diddy, and he's like, Diddy, man, I can throw a better party than you. He's like, I have my crowded living room. I'm gonna order buckets of chicken from KFC, and we're gonna get lit. We're gonna get turned, just as hot as you did in your big ass mansion.
The white party. Yeah.
Right. And so this is what Jamie Foxx did. Every person that went there, yo man, give me your number, give me your contact. What's your email? You don't have a number? Don't want to share your number? Give me your email. And he would blast them out. He would say, all right, this new thing is popping off. And so his Rolodex, his contact list was bananas. Like he was hosting people like Drake and Kanye.
Goes back to the banana piece.
Full circle.
I missed the bananas part, what?
Oh, he's a banana.
He's a banana seller.
He's a port authority on bananas.
Oh, is that right?
Bananaologist.
Bananaologist.
Just like you're a taste espionage expert.
Yes, that's right.
And baby pigeons.
That's right.
It's a sign, yeah.
Got to.
But like he was hosting people like Kanye and Drake before they blew up, right? But those are the kinds of things that he did. Is he was very diligent about cultivating. If you read any of Outliers and Connectors and things like that, he was a quintessential connector, which is Chrissy knows. I love doing that. It's my.
I was like, that's a Serge. Like when I was reading Malcolm Gladwell's, I was like, oh, this is Serge.
I always say, actually, it's hidden in one of these one of the things that we wrote. One of the guiding principles I have in life is part ways leaving others feeling enriched. In every interaction I have, it doesn't matter if I just joke a little bit with the cashier at my favorite coffee shop. It doesn't matter if we're having a profound connection like something like this. It doesn't matter if it's something I run into someone in a conference. But my job in life is to part ways with that person, leaving them feeling enriched in some way. And it's not for me to define. Maybe it was a fleeting giggle. Maybe it was food for thought for something else they wanted to do. It's not my job to decide that for them, but to do the best that I can to help them feel like that interaction was they were better for that interaction in some way.
What was it that kind of inspired you to, I guess, work with a community? Like, I think a lot of people, like, I can't say myself that I grew up, like, I mean, aside from, like, playing soccer for, like, the community, like, little leagues, like, outside of that, what inspired you to do that?
Well, I think one of the beautiful things about community is it's such a flexible word. Your soccer team is a community.
Right.
The people in this room is a community. And so it's not necessarily like, well, I just happen to be working with a couple cities advisory boards, but your community can be all of you who work together for Tau Group. That's a community, right? And so what inspired me was part of the trauma of being a military kid. This was before the interwebs. I'm older than I look. Part of the interwebs, before the interwebs, I had to snail mail write everyone. And Chrissy and I were joking when I said I'm the connector. People would write me and say, where's so-and-so deployed? Oh, they're in Pusan now, or they're in Yokota. So I was like the central hub dispatching these letters and like, all right, this is where they are, this is their email address, right? And so I went to 3 different high schools in 3 different countries, including my senior year.
Wow.
So I was literally the new kid every year. So imagine trying to graduate and like I'd be sitting with my classmates and they're like, hey, remember in 8th grade? Remember in 4th grade? I'm like, I remember 4 months ago.
Yeah.
I don't remember 4th grade because I wasn't here. And so that craving for community was from then, because I didn't have, my community was so transient then.
Right.
And so I formed connections really fast and deeply, very quickly. Because then, if you didn't make friends, you were off to the next station. So you either had to do it quickly or it was off to the new space. And that's what I'm saying, your tribe, you don't have to work hard for your tribe. Your tribe will come to you.
It's just
Right.
expanding that word community. It's like I think people, we view it as like community is like a town kind of thing. But
Yeah.
community could be, like you said, just a small group of people. So just understanding that word to a deeper level, I guess.
Reiki healers. You guys, as big or as small as that community might be in Las Vegas, that's a community.
Right.
Right? Who knows? Like you guys can be creating a new hub for the mixed modality of Reiki, Theta, and body coding and
Well, it's
motion
funny that you
coding.
say that
Right?
because in working with one of my clients, you know, and her going in a completely different direction, and she's kind of
You're at a loss.
She's like, you're way too sober.
You're at a loss for words. Here's some more.
she was super
Cocktails
kind of hung
are
up on
really
like,
good.
you know, what exactly the specifics were, and I'm trying to listen because I as much as I want to like help and like interject, there's a part of it where I have to allow people to kind of like experience things as well, right? So she's like, you know, I feel like I need the name for this my own little company before I can proceed on anything, and I was like, okay, start brainstorming on some names then, and you know, it's gonna come to you. But the funny thing was, it did something in return for me.
Yeah.
It made me think about, you know, my own company and how I have, my company's called Potent Habit, but then I was like, well, you know, something clicked and I was like, maybe it's more of an umbrella. Maybe Potent Habit is more an umbrella, because Potent Habit is about creating healthy habits that serve your highest good, right? And so it can be range from products to healing to XYZ. And I started thinking about how I am mixing the different modalities, and I'm like, I feel like I need something specifically for that. And I went home after outreach. There's this last Thursday night, and it was just on my mind. And I'm sitting at my counter and I'm doing research, and all of a sudden it just clicked. And it was something that I've been saying over and over and over again, and it's root cause. Root cause. I want to get to the root cause. Root cause.
Yeah.
And I kept hearing that word, and I was like, okay. And I love design and art, and different fonts and play on words and stuff like that. So I was like, let me try to spell it different. And so I literally typed this email and I sent it out to a couple people, and I'm like, which one looks the best? And I spelled root, like R-O-O-T, R-U-T, with the umlauts, with the line over the 2 O's, cause, K-O-Z, with the O, with the little arrow thing on top, or whatever you call it. And I'm like, I don't know, there's something there. And so I go, maybe, you know, and I've told before, you're probably going to come up with your own little method of healing at some point, right? And so I thought, well, maybe this is starting now, you know, root cause.
Yeah.
And it's really kind of not it's blurring the lines of it being like, Reiki and Theta and emotion code, and it's really like, fucking just put it all together, and how does it all go together? Because everything goes together somehow.
Well, that's what Bruce did, right?
Yeah.
Bruce was like,
Exactly.
this isn't working for me, this other thing does, and so I decided to take the next year and a half off. I'm not looking for permanent gigs. I'm just kind of doing my own thing, traveling and visiting communities, and I do have I'm from the base, of course. I have a mobile startup I'm working on too. But, it's kind of like when you're in LA, you're an actor. Everybody's an actor in LA.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the same thing in the Bay, but with apps.
Actually, what is it in Vegas?
Cocktail witches.
Pretty much, yeah.
But one of the things I'm most looking forward to in the next year and a half is what I'm going to learn about myself. And I fancy that I'm a pretty self-aware person, but we build these assumptions and we build these paradigms that we get so comfortable with. And I'm sure in the next year and a half, I'm going to discover things about myself like, wow, okay, that's new. And one of the things I've been most guilty about is over planning and over architecting and over designing. Just do. You're not going to get it perfect, but what you can do well is how quickly you respond to not getting it perfect, right? You just iterate. And so, like when you first came up with this idea of I think I read this story was that this was something you harkens back to something your dad did with you, right?
Yeah, actually it was.
Okay, can you explain that too? I sent because I couldn't fit everything in the text and like your whole thing. I wasn't able to send. I only told like a few people about that.
Yeah.
But like your daddy's hour.
Yeah, so my dad, so growing up, my dad was a very curious person, and I remember as a kid, I always saw him like reading all the time. You know, my dad was very ambitious, and like he got an MD PhD, and so he was a professor of medicine for a while too. So we kind of grew up like where education was like a huge thing. And so he, every Sunday, for a while we would have what he called daddy's hour, where basically, so I grew up with like 3 other brothers, so there's 4 boys in the family. So we would just like gather around and like we would just ask my dad anything, like how does a microwave work, or how does what's the meaning of life? And my dad's answer for that one was really funny. He said to enjoy food and avoid death.
Yeah.
I was like, I can't argue with that.
Dad is so smart.
Yeah.
He has a way of compressing a lot of wisdom into a very short phrase.
That's awesome.
But yeah, so we called it Daddy's Hour, and I remember it was just like one of my favorite times, because it was just a way of connecting with my dad in a different way. And at the same time, it was like I was learning a lot. So as an adult, like I just kind of figured, why not bring back that format but put it among peers. And I really identify with this, how you said that you feel like you're still discovering things about yourself. And I feel the same way with Living Room Talks, because like to give kind of a context, right? Like right after I got out of a relationship, the primary feeling that I was feeling actually was a sense of disconnection with people, and part of that was because I think when I was in a relationship, you guys can probably relate. It's just, over time I just kind of went out less, and she was like a social butterfly. And so like I might just like rely on her for like planning parties or planning to go out or whatever, and I just like tag along, right? So I didn't really have the sort of like habit of building community or reaching out, and I just like kind of lost a lot of these habits. Even though I think I'm actually a pretty social person, it's just that over time I just became that way, right? So right after that breakup, I did a lot of sort of like self-improvement type programs. So have you guys ever heard of Landmark?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
I've been trying to sell these 2 on it. I'm going December.
Awesome. That's
Chrissy must be earning affiliate rev or something.
Yeah. So Landmark is you guys have probably heard of like Tony Robbins, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So he does a lot of work of like how to like just looking inside yourself and like figuring out like what are some of the things that are like really holding you back? What are some of the narratives in your head that where you have self-limiting beliefs? What are some pain, like emotional pain that you're harboring, and where it's manifesting externally? So a lot of the Reiki stuff you're talking about really resonates with me, right? So I went to Landmark, and I think when I went to Landmark, I was thinking like, oh yeah, like I want to like do even better in my business, or I want to do all these things, and when I was there, I realized that no, that's actually not what the pain is. Actually, it's a sense of disconnect. It's a sense of it's like I want to feel more connected with other people, and also I want to make a bigger impact. That was like the primary feeling that I personally had. So then I came up with this idea of living room talks, which I think connected both of those pieces, which is I want to feel a feeling of connectedness, but also make a bigger impact.
You say you started this about 3 or 4 months ago. Prior to that, how much time did you spend thinking about, well, I should really do living room talks?
I think Landmark was part of so living room talks was sort of a product that came out of that whole self development type work.
So we actually met in one of these programs.
Yeah, that's actually how we met.
In one called the Self-Expression Leadership Program, which is like 4 months long, and you meet for a few hours every week for 4 months.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things in that program is that it's all built around a project that you put on. And so everyone picks something that they want to do, and then that program is a framework for that.
Mm-hmm.
And you pick living room talks.
Yeah, and I think living room talks, like I saw your chart of like mind, body, was it like mind, body, soul or something?
Mind, body, soul, mind, body, spirit, whatever you
Yeah.
associate. Yeah, the other thing.
Have you guys heard of this Japanese word ikigai? What?
So we have like our mastermind talks, and we meet like regularly and talk on the phone, and we like go through all of our things. And our pulse that we go through normally, it's titled ikigai.
Oh, really?
We both just like, yeah.
Oh, cool. I think I love Japanese in that they just have like the perfect word, for something. Where ikigai is sort of this intersection between what you're good at, what actually you probably have to remind me, like what you're good at, what you find meaningful,
Mm-hmm.
what pays money, and then something else, what you're passionate about, maybe.
Your
passion.
occupation is what you get paid for. Your career is what you're good at, and your calling is what your purpose is,
What your
right? Something
purpose,
like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Something along
basically,
those lines.
if you don't have any one of those four, then you're gonna feel a sense of like meaningless in your life, right? So let's say you're doing something like super meaningful to you, but it doesn't make any money, right? That's also not a good situation, because then you might have to do other things to make money, right? It's just not practical. Or if you're really good at something, let's say you're like a Wall Street banker or something, and you're super good at your job, but you don't find meaning in it, right? Then you're still gonna feel this sense of like something's off. And so for me, I think that the journey, at least for me, is like kind of finding what that ikigai is for me. But Living Room Talk certainly does hit on a lot of things that I really like. I mean, I love like just the community aspect of it so far has given me a ton of meaning. I mean, even like, look at this, like, I'm in Vegas and I'm hanging out with like really cool people. And like, this is actually one of the coolest things I did in Vegas, right? And that would have been a very different experience if, I did do a lot of touristy stuff too, but, but still, like, I also did stuff like this, right? And, so I think, one thing that Living Room Talks has given me a lot is, I remember just a lot of the talks that I've been having, like that we've been having, they really inspire me, because like the woman who spoke about like volunteering in Syria, or like I had a friend who, born in China, moved to the US, started a company called Market X, that was very inspiring for me, right? And I remember after the talks, Paulina, who was the one that spoke about Syria, she came up to me and she was like thanking me for, starting this project and basically creating a platform for her to be able to speak up about this story. Because, because I asked her, like, how many times have you shared this story? Because this story is incredible. Like, you should actually share it more. But there's not that many opportunities for, like a kind of a story like that, right? So she was like thanking me for starting this platform, but all I could really think about was like, I'm surprised she's thanking me, because I actually just feel very inspired, and I feel like I'm getting much more value out of it, It's like the people that inviting, I'm just getting so much value out of it that I just feel very thankful for it. And so I actually feel like hosting something like a Living Room Talks, it makes me feel like way more connected. I feel like it's sort of a like a format and a system in which I can meet a lot of really interesting people, and just like connect with people in a different way. So it's really been a big gift for myself.
How do you choose the specific, like, is there a specific type of person you have speaking at the talks, or it's just like anybody like posting, like, okay, well, this person because this person knows this person, or like, how do you do it?
Didn't you say it evolved too, where like some of the ones after you didn't even know some of the people? That's what I think was so great, right?
Yeah,
because it's just word of mouth.
Okay.
So
yeah,
like
it's
if,
basically word of mouth. Yeah.
that's kind of what I was telling Renee. I was like, do you feel like, and that's why, like even Renee, like we never really talked that much. Like we worked together, but I kind of noticed this transition with him. Like all of a sudden I started seeing certain things that I'd never really noticed about you, because we never really spoke. We weren't really like friends or like anything. But I started seeing him like mention things about like mindfulness and like stuff that was just very like nuanced to like, you know, being open-minded about these different kinds of experiences. So that's why I invited you above like, you know, like some other people I'm close to, because I'm like, oh, you're in that right frame of mind where you're ready to like accept different communities of people too.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of what.
And it all fit in, and it fit in my life with the situations that I was going through at that time too. So I mean, yeah.
But I think that's kind of the great thing about it, is it's anybody that will benefit. But you know, it's the same thing, like being in a nightclub industry and specifically like cocktail waitresses and they have their designer stuff, like that's not going to be necessarily the people that would want to come. So it's also seeing like who is going to benefit from the experience. Like I think anybody can, but it's who's ready at that certain point in their life to accept different ideas and gain from it.
If you look at the characteristics of virality, right? Living Room Talks hits so many of those fronts because anyone can do it. In fact, there may have been points in your journey where like, why hasn't someone already done this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's there's deceptiveness in that simplicity, and now no one in this room should walk away tonight thinking that they couldn't do this if they wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
It may not resonate with you, may not want to do it, but at least the physical, I could do that if I wanted to. You should walk away from this room feeling that empowered, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what's going to be your secret in taking this and scaling this. There's a book, I just got it, I haven't read it yet, called Human Universals. It's actually an old book. I want to say like it's written in like the 60s or maybe even earlier.
Mm-hmm.
And what it does is it studies all cultures across human history. And there's certain universals that are true of every culture. And so what people have taken away from that book is, in the business context, if you basically serve a human universal, you will make money. If you address some of the human non-universals, that's how you become a disruptor. Equality is not a human universal. Justice is, or at least the seeking of justice is, right? So if you play to those and the people you want to reach, that's where you capture.
Mm-hmm.
And again, you know, if you think about, if we take it to the internet, all the things that spread were things that people felt like they could do. Can has cheeseburger. They weren't the first to have cool, funny pictures, but they were one of the first to say, you can make one too. You can make a meme too.
Mm-hmm.
ALS challenge, right, was anyone could take a bucket of ice and dump it on themselves. Anyone could nominate someone else, right? And so part of at least one of the ingredients of taking this to the next stage or growing it is the fact that it's so accessible. When we designed the memory tournaments, we didn't want to be the bottleneck. It was one of the challenges of the existing memory organization out there, the world, I forget the name of it. I had a concussion in the past year, that's why even though I'm a memory master, I'm struggling. But one of their challenges is they wanted that elite and elitist group to control everything. And you can't scale that, because when there's just 5 people who control it, how can you create access to the millions of people out there that can benefit from it? Mm-hmm. And so for you, you know, coming up with a simple kit, a bag of tricks, of like, here's the tips and tricks. You could create a CAN repository, right? A community action network repository. Like, this is how you get people together across disciplines, across philosophies or whatever, right? These may be the characteristics that will get you started. This is how you gather their contact information. This is the action you do 1 month later, 2 months later, 3 months later, right? Mm-hmm. And you'll figure out your way across. Like, you know, we know this through agile methods, right? You iterate, you fail, and iterate quickly.
Yeah.
We used to always say fail fast, fail cheap, and iterate, right? And like I said, I've been I've been very guilty of this, of just trying to get it perfect, trying to architect. But the people who keep beating me are the people just to go do, right?
Yeah, that's actually why I'm trying not to put too many constraints on the format. of the room talks. Like for example, I probably didn't give you too much like instruction on like how I actually did it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And part of that is because I am actually really curious, like how do other people think about
How are they
posting?
going to interpret that idea?
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
What's been really surprising to me is how, like, the idea, even when you don't convey it to other people, how people seem to generate it in pretty much the exact same way themselves. Like, this is the third one that has, well, this is the second one, I guess, the third one hosted by somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, what was the other one? The one in.
So my friend Joy hosted one, but she didn't have a big enough living room, so she just hosted at my place basically. So it's basically still at my place, but she kind of took the reins.
She chose
thought
the
in a different
speakers.
And she chose the speakers.
Yeah.
And because she has a slightly different network, slightly different, like a lot of her friends are like PhD guys, right? And so like so then a lot of their talks were like a little bit more academic, I would say. And then one of my friends, and then one of my other friends, like a lot of her friends are like engineers and stuff. So a lot of their talks were like that. But then there was one on polyamory, which is kind of cool.
It doesn't surprise me that you say they tend to gravitate towards a similar format. Kinship is one of the universals. So the fact that it's like who hasn't sat around the living room talking about family,
It's
right?
so comfortable and it's easy and everybody. It's like its own theme.
Right. And that's why you may find some people don't want to video it, at least in the beginning, right? And so until they feel comfortable with it, because right now, no one knows how those will be used, right?
That's true, yeah.
And so if you leave it open enough where people can adapt it to what makes sense and what resonates for that particular community, you'll be fine. Because you're going to be sitting at some landmark session one day and someone's going to say, oh yeah, I learned that from this living room talk we had in Philly. Like, I created that.
Yeah.
That was me.
So what I usually do when I'm designing systems, just for my own curiosity, is I'll plant Easter eggs.
Oh, what was that we just talked about, that you ended up hearing about it? Oh, when you were making up those drinks, remember? When they ran out of alcohol at a bar and they were making up drinks, so he made up this like outlandish name like Red Asphalt. And then it was just like a mix of juices, and later on he was at a bar somewhere and somebody asked for like a red asphalt.
Kevin, that's why this baby making up stuff
Yeah.
is not new to me.
Yeah.
Like we were sitting at a bar one day, someone walked in and like, can I get a red asphalt before this? Again, this was before the interwebs where you could look stuff up. And the bartender looked at him like, what are you talking about? But you know, and the funny thing is that night we never made two red asphalts the same. Because basically what happened was my brother and I were bartending at a fraternity party, and they had run out of like the major alcohols and mixers. So all we had left, I think, was like gin. I forget. We had like the stuff that kind of gets left behind, and then a ton of grenadine. And so I would just off the dome mix stuff, and then just put a gang of grenadine in it, and that was a red asphalt. And even people who came up and asked for a drink, like, no, that's not what you want, man. Let me get you the new. Trust, man, trust. Right? And then so that later in the part, people kept coming up to the bar saying, hey, can you make that red asphalt? Like, hey, man, you can only get that from us, man. This is new. So yeah, you're gonna be around somewhere. But what I do is I plant little Easter eggs, little trails where I can find my way back to say that was for me. So in documents it's easy. So there's hidden code that you can put, like even in PowerPoint and things like that. And I put hidden images and things like that. Not because I care about the IP, but I'm curious to track how it evolved and how it became viral. And so little things like this, like the simplest one that anyone can do now is you come up with your hashtag. Right? That's about the easiest thing you can do.
Oh, interesting, okay.
And you encourage people. And so usually I didn't do it here because I didn't know what to expect in the format. But usually at the end of any talk I give, I have like links to all of the resources that I shared. I have hashtags, I have my social media accounts and things like that. And I didn't do that one because this didn't have that formal feel. But for you could say, you know, it's the hashtag LRT, right? Hashtag living room talks. Hashtag, you know, daddy talk, whatever, right? Daddy hour, whatever. But that thing will let you trace that and how it evolved throughout. And it's the common thread, because it will be a tool for you later as you go into other communities, because you'll say, because I don't quite get this, and what am I supposed to do? Oh yeah, just look at this hashtag. And then they'll say, oh, that's how they did it. or now this video, and then your tribes will take it in other directions that you didn't expect, and then you'll be able to track it back through those Easter eggs, right?
That's it. Yeah, I think social media is definitely something I need to be more on top of. I think because I personally don't use social media that much, it's I'm kind of having to like reorient myself and like teach myself how to do it a little bit more with like living room talks. But yeah, and I love that. Like, and also I like the accessibility of, well, not accessibility, but just sort of not putting too much pressure on the presenters to actually do a formal presentation, to have like slides and stuff. I think that just keeps a lot of the pressure off, and because I think a lot of this kind of presentation, it comes internally. I mean, it probably wasn't hard for you to like talk that long.
I didn't know what I was doing, and then right before I left the door, I was like, maybe I should bring my pendulum and my whatever, you know what I mean? Just because I was like, maybe I need to show it, for everyone to kind of like get a better idea of what it is versus just talking about it, you know? So it's like, okay, I'll just take it. If it comes up, no, and then I just had that feeling, so I just put it there, and sure enough.
Yeah, it's like there's already this wealth of knowledge in you that yeah, like you could totally do an hour presentation about this topic. It's like timber. I didn't know I could talk an hour and 20 minutes about timber.
All these photos I came up with while I was waiting at the airport. I'm like, oh, I'll show that. Because it felt like just staring at me for like however long it was.
Yeah.
Like, let me give you some other prettier things to look at them. Unfortunately, it was a little. I admit it was a little distracting with the thing constantly locking. Whatever. So I would change that next time for myself. But yeah.
Yeah, and even my ex, like she, the reason why she presented is because. Like one of my friends, he couldn't make it to the talk and he was one of the presenters. And so I was like, hey, why don't you present something? And she was like, well, the only thing I can think of is like, I just got out of, like I fixed my depression and all this stuff and I'm feeling great. Maybe I should just tell that story. Like, is that weird? And I was like, okay, just go for it, right? and then she gave a 45-minute talk about her whole experience and it was great.
And it was depression?
Was that?
It was depression?
Like she got out of depression from
the
doing that.
But the funny thing was that what we released from you was depression.
Oh yeah. That was your feeling.
Yeah.
The connectedness there. But also when you said earlier too about being disconnected, there's a depression in that too, right?
Yeah, for sure. Actually, something I didn't mention there was that one big realization for me that I had was that almost every negative feeling that we have, it's usually when it's too much of a focus on self. And I think that's, it's too much like, whether that's inside my own head, inside my own ego, all these things. And I think that feeling of disconnectedness is a focus on self. It's too much of a focus on self, right? And even if you look at like a lot of the kinds of things I've been involved with, like, I run like this lifestyle business or I've done bodybuilding, right? It's a very like self-focused kind of activity. But I think once like, even like, let's say doing community and you're more outwardly focused, like it's almost like you start to feel that connection with others where your sense of ego and your sense of self kind of dissolves and you kind of realize that that feeling oneness with someone, like that is basically what love is, right? That's what that feels like. And so like that feeling of connectedness is I think what actually gets me out of a lot of these kind of like negative states. So living room talks is a vehicle for me to really discover that for myself.
And one of the antidotes I have for myself when I start having those negative emotions is I'll go do something with someone else. And it instantly stops me out. Because I'm like, that thing I was worried about was bullshit. This is, every year I write something for my birthday. Because I don't generally
So did you finish it?
No, I'm still struggling with it. It'll come to me. I'll have inspiration. So I don't tend to focus on, I don't have parties or things for my birthdays, except if my age ends in a 0 or 5. Then I do it up big, and I do it epic. But in the in-betweens is usually just self-reflective. And usually I'll write a post for friends and family on it. And I remember one of the ones that I wrote a couple years ago was on the question why. And in the past year of that birthday, I've been thinking a lot about when I ask people why. And as an adult, well, let me start first. I thought of it because whenever I ask my nephews why, it's because I genuinely want to know. Like, they'll come up with something, and I'm like, what in your child's mind made you think that or took you in that direction? Like, I genuinely want to know. But usually as an adult, when I ask another adult why, it's because I have my "you're wrong" cocked and loaded. Like, here's why you're wrong, right? And for me, social media had gotten so bad with that. That's why I kind of stopped doing a lot of the social media, was because I was ready to just say, yeah, you're wrong, here's why. And so I started to question myself, like, you're not allowed to ask why anymore unless you really want to know why, right? Whether you decide later you agree with it or not, but you should at least be open to the answer of why. And so that was one of my posts. And these are the kinds of things that come out when I don't celebrate. I just kind of sit and wonder and be mindful that day. So I'm struggling. I think the startings of my posts this year will be, that's like crazy. A lot of messed up stats have happened to me this year. Like, I've been to the ER 4 times for different reasons. I had a concussion. It took me out for 8 months. This job that I loved for 15 years just divorced me and had changed the locks on me in the same day. But then when I stack that against the other stats in my life, you know, I helped 118 women entrepreneurs this year through Kiva, right? And all these other positive things I have in my life. Those are the stats that are more important to me. Those are the stats that are more fulfilling. So it's going to be something like that. It's going to be probably something more in the vein of, have you guys read the book How We Measure Your Life by Clayton Christensen? So Clayton Christensen is mainly known for his writings and thoughts on innovation. And he had developed cancer, and so he had written this book, How We Measure Your Life.
Oh, is it the Innovator's Dilemma? Is that
He's the author of that, yeah. And so yeah, that's what I'm looking forward to most in this next year and a half, is like just figuring out how do I want to be measured by. You know, the old adage of, you know, when you die, do you want your eulogy to read as an application or as a affirmation of the change and impact you've had in the world, you know, your time here. So I didn't plan it this way, but this is just kind of how the universe pointed me in this direction. And, you know, Chrissy wasn't making a big fuss about this for me. She's like, oh, you don't have to come if you don't want to. I'm like, no, I want to come and support you on this first talk, you know. I didn't think I'd be learning about Timberland. I didn't think I would find kindred spirits who like making up stories. So now if I run into you guys out in the world wide somewhere.
Well, no, this is why I was telling you remember is that I have a really good friend in San Fran, Serge. That's him.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
And I always do
You have a terrible memory.
Connecting the two now.
That's like reminding
That's gonna
you,
be
because I
your
didn't think you
efforts.
remembered.
That's gonna be if I can get Serge's heart wall down. Even though I fancy
That's
it, my heart
awesome
wall's
because
pretty
like
open.
I want to scale the room.
I feel like my heart wall's pretty open.
I think he's like
portions,
perverse
there's
with
different
that.
angles.
It's coming down.
Like, you know,
It's coming
full
down.
frontal assault is pretty open, but my side fronts are like, you know. So.
Actually, I have a quick question about the memory thing. Is that based off like Ed Cook's work on memory, or you know, Joshua Foer?
No, it's purely on Dave's development. Of course, he studied all those, but there are some techniques that are uniquely his. Like, one of the things he developed was if you're trying to recall something from deep memory and you can't quite figure it out, he came up with this technique where basically you keep a notepad by your bed and you set intention of trying to remember that thing in your sleep. And what you do is you try and remember things about it. And then you go to bed, and then when you wake up, the first thoughts that come out will likely be related to that, and you write them down. So he helped his uncle do that, who was trying to find an old buddy from World War II. And so it's one of the things where he says, if there's a thing you can't remember, and it could be trivial, like I can't remember where my keys are. What you try and do is you try and remember around it. So I remember that my keychain has a troll doll on it, and I remember the troll doll has yellow hair. And I remember there are 4 keys on that keychain. And I remember this, that, and the other. Eventually, you'll work your way around to, oh yeah, it's over there. And so that's what he was doing with his uncle with the World War II. But he would say, okay, can you at least remember some of the cities you visited together? Oh yeah, we were here in France. And so eventually he let us pay. And he was doing the go to bed and wake up.
And does he have any like synesthesia or anything like that?
No, he does not himself, no. But he obviously knows some memory masters who do.
Actually, I'm curious. Have you guys ever read a book called Moonwalking with Einstein?
Yeah.
That's such a good
I heard
book.
that's a good book.
So the group, he...
There's so many. Okay, you guys need to make a list, because I'm gonna be honest, I don't read a lot of books, but I'm getting the message I need to read more.
We do audiobooks though too.
Yeah, that
That's
too.
it.
But
Yeah,
it's
we
like
do that all the
there's
time.
been like
Like, I
10
don't
different
listen to
books that you
music,
guys are
really.
talking about. I'm like,
Baby steps. Write them down first, and then figure out whether you want
So
to read one.
here's something you can do on social media. That's low hanging fruit for you. You can create a living room talks reading list.
Yes.
Oh,
And the beauty of that is you don't have to curate it yourself. As other people take it on, they just contribute.
Yeah, because
by
you've all
adding to it.
mentioned so many
Mm.
books
Yeah.
just in and of this
So
session.
Yeah,
I
that's
know
a great
Chrissy
idea.
trains in this, but I also teach speed reading.
I do
So-
with Jim Quick though through like Mind Valley.
Actually, I'd love to.
I need that.
I'd love to get a very brief summary of that book because it's actually really cool. So that book actually really made a huge impact on me because because I have a bad memory and
I know.
I have a bad memory for certain things. Actually, I noticed that it's not that I just have a bad memory in general. It's that I have a bad memory for certain things, right? And when I read that book, I realized that memory it's actually more of a skill and it's not so much like innate.
Mm-hmm.
And so what these memory guys are doing, it kind of goes back to like how our brains are wired. Like our brains, like in the wild or whatever, it's not really that useful for our brains to be able to memorize 100 digits or like 1,000 digits, right? That's not really how our brain works. But the way our brain developed is that we're really good at, let's say, like navigating through the woods. Like if you were to navigate through the woods, you could probably navigate your way back, right? And it's really interesting because like that's a kind of memory that you have that's very well developed, right? It's this kind of like environmental memory, right? And so in the same way, you can probably imagine, because you live in this house, like you can probably imagine like if you close your eyes, like just walking through the kitchen, walking to your bedroom, the bathroom, everything, right? And so what this book basically says is that in order to memorize a list of numbers, what they basically do is they codify. Let's say you're memorizing the digits of pi. You would codify like each digit into a thing, an action, and an environment, right? So it becomes this sort of like and you try to like think of the most creative thing possible. So moonwalking of Einstein, for example, is it's a mnemonic for memorizing like the King of Spades, that card, because like if you imagine like moonwalking with Einstein, like on a moon, like it's very memorable, right, visually. And so what you're basically doing is you're converting all these numbers and you're placing it into what they call a memory palace, right? So if you think about, let's say, an old childhood home or like Chrissy's home, you might be able to imagine just placing things in different corners, right? And you can kind of like visually, let's say like you have Einstein at the doorway, and then now you have like Drake sitting on your couch, and then you have like
That's gonna be the next
P-
living room.
like P Diddy doing cocaine on the table, right? Like just like if you just kind of imagine all those things and you're able to like translate those scenes back into numbers, then you can easily essentially walk through your house, right? And you can just translate those numbers and you can memorize that list.
And I think the more important thing with that too is the fact that you can kind of memorize it backwards and forwards. So
Exactly.
a lot of memorization like tactics are always in a certain order.
Mhm.
So with that, with like the memory palace, you're able to do it back and forth.
Yeah,
So
and it's super.
for rote memory, which is repetition, you can only remember things forward, like the alphabet.
Alphabet, I can't
Right.
do it backwards.
And
Yeah.
so
Yeah, I
true
figured
memory
out, yeah.
techniques allow you to access information in different
I never
forward,
tried.
backward, and jumping around.
Mhm.
So I think I might actually have the deck with me. I could teach you some tricks now in memory.
There we gotta go.
rather than-
It's basically like hijacking.
There's some practical things you can do too. Like if you're constantly forgetting your keys, or any object, if you need to remember where this object is, my phone is the keys. When you set it down, just imagine it exploding. But as you say, exaggerate it. It's not just a poof, right? It's a kaboom, right?
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter where you are. It doesn't matter that you're moving it in different places. It creates the bridge in your mind of where it is. And so what happens sometimes, like you might have experienced this, it was there, but you threw a coat over it, so you couldn't remember it. If you explode it, it doesn't matter if you put an elephant on it, you will remember, get up elephant, you have my keys underneath you.
Well, it's funny you say that because I keep hearing the word intention. Like
It's in
forgot even in
everything.
my own presentation is like when releasing and doing it, it's the intention, the magnets and intensifying magnifying the intention, and that's where the release is. But in anything, you can find in anything, whether it's memory or community or coding, it's the intention you put behind anything.
That actually is like a perfect little segue of intention, because that's kind of what I was telling Renee too when he's asking what I wanted to talk upon. So I didn't want to do like a formal speech. I didn't want to do anything like an actual talk about things I'm knowledgeable about. I'm actually kind of doing like a social experiment. And so this social experiment is loosely based off of Robert Richmond. And so Robert Richmond kind of talks about the whole idea of like, you know, something like movies. Like let's say the Matrix of all things. So everybody within the Matrix, you know, you have that quintessential choice. Do you take the blue pill and you wake up and, you know, you wake up in your bed, things are as they're supposed to be. Or you take a red pill and you wake up to your reality. You see how far you can really go down the rabbit hole. And so kind of we're always kind of based with that idea. And he's like, you know what if I made that a reality? Like what if I could just take this red pill and I could wake up to my real reality? Like, you know, I could know what things are actually supposed to be. He's like, you know, the idea is that your subconscious is always talking to you, but your subconscious doesn't speak English. Your subconscious talks to you through intangible things. Like it talks to you through like symbols, images, all that kind of thing. So wouldn't we be able to talk to our subconscious in the same way by using a symbol? So something like the idea of a pill.
Give me the red one.
Here we go.
So, I mean...
Are you about to inception us?
Hell yeah.
Is this Molly?
I think it's a Tic Tac. Are you trying to say something?
Yeah, but I mean,
I finally got
so
it.
it's this overall idea with the idea of taking a pill. So you guys can kind of really think of any intention you guys want to set out, like whatever you want to happen. You know, that intention, you could be like, you know what? One of the examples with Robert Richmond that he came across was this guy was like, I want no to-do list. And then everybody was like, masterminds are like, no, you want a better relationship with your to-do list. He's like, no, I literally want no to-do list. The other guy's like, hey man, you better be careful because when you're in prison, you don't have a to-do list. And so I think the interesting thing with actually being able to take a pill is, let's say I decide like, I want to be the master timber forester. I take that pill, I can't take that back. You've already actually taken the pill. And so the interesting thing with your mind is being able to take like the red pill, being able to understand your reality, but also being able to set an intention. And so I mean, it doesn't have to be something crazy, it can be. And the thing is there's so many people that take so much time to think about what intention they want to set with this. And so like there's other people that were talking that they're like, you know what, I really want to create this business, but I have to create the website, I have to do that, and I would like to do that on a certain time frame. I'm like, okay, so with that time frame, you just set that into the pill. So with that pill, you're like, within 2 weeks, I want to have this business created. And then you're like, well, I also have a lot of things going on, so I don't want to be tired. I'm like, okay, so you add that into the pill as well. So I want to create this business within 2 weeks, and I don't want to be tired. And so it's a matter of seeing like what your intention is, and once you took that pill, you took that pill. So, I mean, it's kind of like up to you guys at that point. So, I mean, if any of you guys want to set your intention to take your pill now, you can. If you guys want to think about it and take it later.
Take it on the full moon.
And there's nothing in it. I mean,
Damn.
or
Right?
no, but I mean that's the thing. Like it can be nothing and it can be everything. It's just a matter of putting your
use
intention
it with
to
what
it.
you prefer it to be.
Yeah.
But that's the thing, it is nothing and it is everything too. But it's a matter of really deciding like this is what I want to do, and you know, once you take it, there's no take backs. So I mean,
Should we all
Yeah,
take
I
it?
actually
I
like
already
this
know
one,
what
too.
my intention.
All right.
All right, taking the red pill.
Down the rabbit hole.
And then the other thing too is you're also
Is it
putting yourself-
suspicious? Chrissy's the only one not taking a red
Let's examine her pill and see if it's the same
Let's
thing.
switch.
Yeah, right.
You take my pill. Definitely
Why is
wouldn't
your
take-
pill blue?
At least I didn't give you guys Kool-Aid, right?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, does anybody want to speak their intention? Like, and have us ask the why and...
He already ate it.
No. I'll speak mine.
Okay.
I want to launch the beta of my mobile app before the end of the year. And I want to be able to do that while traveling the world. So I don't want to be fixed in San Jose while I do it.
And why do you want to launch? Why do you want to launch this app? What is the significance of it?
The app actually connects people in person, which is consistent with the things that I want to be doing right now. And of all the ideas I constantly come up with, it's actually the one that has the clearest and easiest path to ref. It's Rev positive from day one. So it will get me the financial freedom to do all the other crazy shit that pops into my head, basically. You know.
Alright, so you set your intention.
Down it.
You're ready for your reality.
You guys are gonna talk so much shit.
Follow it.
Launch it before the end of the year.
Alright, you're now held accountable.
Do I know Kung Fu now?
You didn't put it in there, man.
You didn't put it in there.
He didn't ask for it when he took the red pill. That came out.
If you're gonna OD on, you want mine? I'm just like,
If anybody else wants to, or you guys can just take it.
I'm gonna save mine.
I'm looking for my ikigai. Yeah, and I think this year I've been trying a lot of new things that I never would have considered before. A lot of mindfulness stuff. Who was it that said that they didn't really resonate with meditation before?
Right.
So I was the same. Like if you had told me like meditation was one of the most profound habits that people have had, I would just write it off. I'd just be like, oh, I'm not into that stuff, right? Because I feel like I spent like many years of my life just like reading a lot and being just kind of more academic, and I didn't really consider a lot of the spiritual realm of things, and then I started reading books like Eckhart Tolle, Power of Now, and where he talks about the pain body, and then with the Reiki, is that
Reiki and emotion code.
yeah, and I guess it's still reading a book, but but the point is that it kind of opened up that realm for me. So I've been working on a lot of like mindfulness stuff, trying to do the living room talks to fix the or to feel more connected and make it a bigger impact. We've been like going to a lot of improv.
Yeah.
I've been seeing so many benefits of doing improv. You've been really improving there.
Nice.
And improv is great because it's really a practice of letting go, being present, allowing yourself to be silly, making others look good. I mean, there's so many skill sets in improv that I can totally see translating to other parts of my life, and it's permeating slowly but surely into other areas of my life and like just the way I talk in general. So anyways, I think this whole year for me has been a year of exploration. And I can genuinely say I've been very happy this year, And so I would say Ikigai is something I'm still looking for, but that's my intention.
I'm a big believer in the universe conspiring. Like, the universe conspired that I should meet this person, and we were talking about our origin story before, and that I should meet you. And a buddy of mine that I was talking to, I met actually just in this past year. He came back from vacation. He's like, Serge, I have something important to tell you. My wife and I decided we're going to quit our jobs and travel the world with no defined plan, no defined end date. And I'm like, coincidence. I just got laid off. I'm about to do the same thing too. It's like, all right, we're going to meet in Asia. But like, that's why I say I have every confidence for living room talks, because the universe will bring your tribe to you. Like, all these people that are on these journeys will come across your path. Renee, you're saying you're just now kind of like discovering these parts of you. The universe conspired that you should be here, that Chrissy should notice that in you and invite you to the same. And things that a year ago you might have just said, no, what's that thing that this person I never talked to at work? Why would I go to that thing? Like, you're here for that, for that reason. And so I get so geeked out and energetic when I hear people going to that and like,
It's a sign.
What does that mean?
You're not ready for the red pill.
I don't know if you're ready for the red pill.
That means your intention can't wait to be unbottled. It has to
Alright.
It has to be consumed. Actually, that happened to like one of my best friends is getting married. It was a very religiously connected wedding, and part of the thing was they had this all carefully orchestrated where they were gonna pour the sand together and it symbolized the union, and the table crashed and it went everywhere, right? And to his credit, the guy who was officiating, good family friends of his, very religious, says, yeah, that's okay. He was on the crowd. That's okay. God just couldn't wait to bring these two together. That's all.
Oh, that's
You're
really well
good for that. You're
done.
good for that, dude. It's low clap for that.
That was well done.
But yeah, man, I'm genuinely excited for you. Like, to see people like coming to that point where they want to explore that and find their ikigai.
Thank
So, what's your time frame?
Time frame? To find the ikigai? I don't know. I think I've just been looking internally a lot more versus like before maybe it was a lot more external. If I had looked internally, I would have sensed like this feeling of, you know, I need to feel more connected and, you know, do something with more purpose, right? And I think yeah, so it's just been a kind of a paradigm shift for me. Yeah.
Did you take it?
I took the red pill, yeah.
Wait, so your red pill was, are you sharing it and that is seeking an ikigai, or you're keeping it to yourself?
Sorry, what's that?
Is that your stated
Was that your
intention?
intention? Was
Oh
you
yeah,
gonna
that's my
find your
intention.
ikigai?
Yeah.
Did you set a time frame
You
for
need a
yourself?
time frame.
Oh, time frame. Huh.
It's still digesting. You can still.
I know. It hasn't hit your bloodstream just yet.
12 months from now.
So
12 months
next,
from now.
what month is now? August?
Just remember, by my birthday next year, dude.
Oh yeah. Oh, we're
Is it
still,
0
we're
or
not over
5?
5 yet though.
No, 2 more years.
Oh.
2
Oh.
years is gonna be epic because my startup will have blown up by then, so my bank account will be fat.
We're all gonna be on that higher level.
Oh yeah.
We're all gonna be there. On the
Oh, I'm
Timberland.
telling friends, you bring a go bag and you bring a passport, and I'll tell you ahead of time these are the vaccinations you need. That's all you need to know.
That's awesome.
I like that kind of birthday party.
Nice.
Shots.
Like a little
Shot.
Literal
No, really, shots.
Damn team.
Thank you so much.
Frogs for everyone.
Coming up with this, and thank you.
I
Chrissy,
know,
for
thank
having
you
us.
for
Yeah, it's awesome.
the creation of this.
It's helping everyone grow. You know, no matter what stages we're in. You know.
And
We're
is
all,
anybody else
Thank you.
taking theirs, or are they saving it?
I'm gonna save mine.
I'm gonna take
Save
mine.
because
Okay.
I'm gonna keep it to myself, but
Yeah,
I'm
no,
gonna
that's
say I'm gonna say 3 months, and I'm gonna take it before it runs away again.
Nice.
And thank you, Chrissy, for hosting the first Vegas living room talks.
Yay. Thank you guys for coming.
You're a much better host than me. Like the whole red pill, everything. I need to step up my host game. I'm more just like everyone come,
Yeah.
eat whatever you want in the fridge.
Let me go get on that real quick.
Thank you so much. This is awesome.
Let's get a picture, right?
Yeah.
Yes,
we
yeah,
should have
let's,
a picture.
That too, yeah.
Okay, I can set up my.
So
Did yours? How did your battery last this long? Or not your battery, but your memory.
Oh
Are
wow,
you
yeah,
recording
it's
in
still going.
4K?
Oh,
A lot of
I'm kind of surprised it's still going.
yeah, me too.
Where did I lose this?
Alright, pull the top.
My attention.
Alright, I got the phone. If you got the phone, I got the
Okay.
stand.